Good morning, everyone. So wonderful you decided to join us. And if I can just say, may the 4th be with you as we begin our service today. Reminder to silence your phone, and whether you're joining us in person or online, we'll start today, as we always do, by centering ourselves for worship, taking a big breath together, all together. We open and welcome to the ancestral people of this land, acknowledging that our church, like all of Burke, rests on the unceded territory of the Manahoac tribe of the Great Sioux Nation. We seek healing and the realization of justice with the people of this land who live on and their descendants, the present-day members of the Monacan Indian Nation, the Patawomic Indian Tribe of Virginia, and the Piscataway Indian Nation. We honor the ancestors as we move toward healing so that all together shall one day know full justice.
Today will be a joyful day. Open your doors to the song. Enter, rejoice, come in. Enter, rejoice, and come in. Enter, rejoice, and come in. Today will be a joyful day. Enter, rejoice, and come in.
Good morning. Welcome to Accotink Unitarian Universalist Church. My name is Milton Nash. My pronouns are he, him, and I am very happy to be your worship associate today. If you aren't new to Accotink, look around. Do you see people you haven't met or haven't spoken to in a while? These people like you and want to meet you. So help us live up to our mission to be a welcoming and inclusive spiritual home for all by reaching out and making a connection today. By visiting this congregation, newcomers are in a transition moment, and people in transitions are more open to new relationships, to new friendships. That means that your new best friend might be here this moment, may even be sitting right next to you, and this is your chance to get to know them before someone else does. So whether you're a longtime member or a newcomer or something in between, we encourage you to stay for our social hour, online and in person, immediately after the service. We are so delighted that you decided to join us here today. Welcome.
I gave you all a little extra time this morning for that Greet Your Neighbor because I could tell that you're into it. You're into meeting and greeting each other, which is so wonderful. This month, we're beginning a new monthly theme. We use Soul Matters monthly themes. And this month, the theme is imagination. And I was thinking this morning about today's service, and I was reminded of this book, The Gospel According to Oprah. And the thing is, I haven't actually read the book. I had this dance teacher, David Zambrano, I studied with at the American Dance Festival one summer, and occasionally he would say, it's like Metamorphosis, by Kafka. And then he would say, I haven't read it, but it's like that. So I did skim The Gospel According to Oprah in the bookstore many years ago, and this is what I got from it. That Oprah couldn't have shows where she raised money for like really hard, painful, horrible stuff, where she brought attention to those things every day because people wouldn't come back, right? She had to mix it up with makeovers and fun stuff like that. And so that's what we're doing this morning. That's the whole point of this, is today's going to be a fun service, and my message, I hope you'll enjoy. It's fun. And then next Sunday, we'll get back a little bit to some of the more challenging stuff. The service is called What Do We Need to Imagine? And we're going to look at the relationship between different generations and the conflict and even bitterness that develops sometimes between different generations. And we're going to look at what do we need to imagine together, all together, in this moment, in this time. And then our third Sunday, as always, is a multi-generational service. It's also our flower communion, which is a unique Unitarian Universalist ritual that's born from World War II. The last time that authoritarian fascism spread and threatened freedom and sentient life on Earth across the globe. So in that service, we're going to build on the theme of the month by exploring how from generation to generation we can imagine and nurture a new world into being. And then we'll close out the month with a message from Reverend Catherine Adams, a longtime member of this congregation, who now serves the UUs of Chester River, and who this congregation helped to ordain last year. We're co-ordaining another member the following Sunday after that, Brenna Kelly. Yay! Yay! But first, let's learn from Oprah and have some fun today. I invite you to rise in body and spirit and join in our chalice lighting words, which come from this congregation's mission statement. Together we care in community, grow in spirit, and act for justice. And you can
shout when the Spirit says shout. When the Spirit says shout, you gotta shout, oh Lord. You gotta shout when the Spirit says shout. Spirit says shout, 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 Spirit says shout. You gotta shout.
My name is Michelle Anderson. I am the Children and Youth Spiritual Development Director, and I'm so excited to be here today. And you were excited too. Man, that song was fabulous. So I could hear it in my office when I was putting together last minute some story for you. So let me tell you, this is a story. All right, super, thank you. All right, so this is a story with two places. And this is one of those stories that we think is like foundational in Unitarian Universalism. It's called The Winds of Hope. That's a little loud. There we go. Is that better? Okay. It's the story of John Murray. How many of you have ever heard of John Murray? Yeah, we don't tell these stories very often. So that's one of my jobs. I'm going to try to learn to teach you all these stories. So this was adapted by the Reverend Barbara Palmer, and it's a story of hope. It's called The Winds of Hope. A person never knows for sure about the wind, where it comes from, what it blows in, what it takes away. Can you guys be like the wind? Whoosh. See, it blows things all over the place. Suddenly, it can change directions and how it can then turn a life upside down. It happened that way to one special man. Unpredictable winds kept buffering and reshaping his life. For John Murray, there we go. An ambitious young Englishman, excellent fortune had blown his way. He had a fine education, a steady job, a loving wife. What? Don't let them fall.
They'll all have clothes next week.
I ran out of time.
It's kind of a Garden of Eden type story.
All right, he also had a beautiful young son. Life was so sweet. Yeah. Then, without warning, get your winds ready, an ill wind blew. everything changed. John's wife and son grew gravely ill and soon died. John lost his job, his possessions, and finally he found himself in jail. Not because of the no clothes, but because he was unable to pay his bills. Until this tragic time, John had been a very religious man, a Universalist, in fact, who had preached the good news of a loving God. After losing everything that mattered to him, he fell into a deep depression, and he was no longer certain what he believed. He felt as if all meaning and purpose had gone out of his life. However, caring friends continued to love him and finally convinced him to leave England for a new home where he could begin his life again. And so, on July 21st, 1770, John Murray set sail for America on a ship named Hand in Hand. A wholesome wind, ready? Blew the Hope in Hand, its passengers and crew, toward its final destination, New York City. As the ship neared the coastline and everything seemed to be going well, suddenly a heavy, dense fog rolled in and enveloped Hand in Hand. With visibility at zero, the ship was forced to slow down, for everyone aboard feared a shipwreck. In the confusion, rather than landing in New York Harbor, the ship drifted southward and finally ran aground in New Jersey, a place known as Good Luck Point, to be exact. Trying to figure out what to do next, John and a few passengers volunteered to disembark in order to go ashore for directions and to gather supplies. As he made his way on land, John encountered a farmhouse with a small chapel adjacent to it. The farm belonged to a man named Thomas Potter. Spotting John and his companions on his land, Thomas Potter ran out to greet them, offering food for everyone on board ship, and curiously inviting John to return later and join him for dinner. What John did not know at the time was that this humble farmer had taken very seriously a vision he'd experienced several years earlier. The vision was that one day a minister would come to his chapel to preach the good news of an astounding kind of love, the kind of love that would nourish every person and triumph over every circumstance. Bless you. Thomas Potter had built the chapel, this small meeting house next to his home, for that expected preacher. When Thomas saw the Hand in Hand run aground, he had the overwhelming conviction that his preacher was on that ship. That evening, as John returned to Thomas's home for dinner, Thomas greeted him with these words: "Come, my friend, I am glad you have returned. I have longed to see you, and I have been expecting you for a long time." After dinner, Thomas showed the chapel and explained his dream of how his chapel would be the place where a truthful, loving, inclusive religion, sound familiar? Were to be preached. A religion without the popular themes of the day, judgment and damnation. Sound familiar? John confessed that he had once held the same beliefs. But Thomas Potter told John that he built the chapel and been waiting for a particular minister to arrive. You, John, are that minister. John did not want to hear this. He wasn't a preacher anymore, and he promised himself never, ever to preach again. After all the pain he'd endured and his deep suspicion of the divine, John wanted nothing more than to flee from religion entirely. Have you ever felt that way? Yet Thomas knew in his heart that John Murray was indeed the preacher he'd been waiting for, and he begged John to preach that coming Sunday. I can't preach on Sunday because as soon as the wind changes, my boat will sail, and I will be on it. If the boat doesn't sail by Sunday, then will you preach? John relented. Oh, if I am still here on Sunday, then I will preach. The wind did not blow. The hand in hand did not sail away. Thomas, realizing his dream nearly come true, quickly sent out word to his friends and neighbors that there would finally be a service in the meeting house on Sunday morning, and that the man envisioned in his dream so many years earlier had finally arrived and would be preaching. On Sunday, September 30th, 1770, John Murray preached from that chapel the message of universal love, a love wholly and ultimately available to all people everywhere. The universal message of love was good news to all who heard it, and it was especially good news to John. His experience that Sunday morning and the winds of change and hope that had brought him to this place finally overpowered him. Rather than fleeing from religion and the pulpit, he realized he wanted to preach more than anything else in the world. And he did so for many, many years. John Murray today is considered the founder of Universalism in America. And so today, we offer gratitude to the wind, that wind that blew the hand in hand onto Good Luck Point and would not blow out. John Murray changed his life and all of his lives with the power of hope and the message of the transformative power of love.
I know this rose will open. I know my fear will burn away. I know my soul will unfurl its wings. I know this rose will open.
The reading today is The Road Trip by author and memoirist Elizabeth Gilbert. This reading has somewhat of a meditative quality, so you're invited to let the words wash over you as you listen. The Road Trip. Here's how I've learned to deal with my fear. I made a decision long ago that if I want creativity in my life, and I do, then I will have to make space for fear too. Plenty of space. I decided that I would need to build an expansive enough interior life that my fear and my creativity could peacefully coexist, since it appeared that they would always be together. In fact, it seems to me that my fear and my creativity are basically conjoined twins, as evidenced by the fact that creativity cannot take a single step forward without fear marching right alongside it. Fear and creativity shared a womb. They were born at the same time, and they still share some vital organs. This is why we have to be careful of how we handle our fear, because I've noticed that when people try to kill off their fear, they often end up inadvertently murdering their creativity in the process. So I don't try to kill off my fear. I don't go to war against it. Instead, I make all that space for it, heaps of space, every single day. I'm making space for fear right this moment. I allow my fear to live and breathe and stretch out its legs comfortably. It seems to me that the less I fight my fear, the less it fights back. If I can relax, fear relaxes too. In fact, I cordially invite fear to come along with me everywhere I go. I even have a welcoming speech prepared for fear, which I deliver right before embarking upon any new project or big adventure. It goes something like this. Dearest fear, creativity and I are about to go on a road trip together. I understand you'll be joining us because you always do. I acknowledge that you believe you have an important job to do in my life and that you take your job seriously. Apparently, your job is to induce complete panic whenever I'm about to do anything interesting. And may I say, you are superb at your job. So by all means, keep doing your job if you feel you must. But I will also be doing my job on this road trip, which is to work hard and stay focused. And creativity will be doing its job, which is to remain stimulating and inspiring. There's plenty of room in this vehicle for all of us. So make yourself at home, but understand this. Creativity and I are the only ones who will be making any decisions along the way. I recognize and respect that you are part of this family, and so I will never exclude you from our activities. But still, your suggestions will never be allowed. You're allowed to have a seat, and you're allowed to have a voice, but you're not allowed to have a vote. You're not allowed to touch the road maps. You're not allowed to suggest detours. You're not allowed to fiddle with the temperature. Dude, you're not even allowed to touch the radio. But above all else, my dear old familiar friend, you're absolutely forbidden to drive. Then we head off together, me and creativity and fear, side by side forever, advancing once more into the terrifying but marvelous terrain of unknown outcome.
So, about 20 years ago, I wrote a picture book. It was called The Boy with a Sky in His Belly. The boy had a little hole where his belly button was, and then it got bigger and bigger, and whenever he felt emotions, those emotions would reflect in the sky in his belly. So if he was sad, storm clouds would appear and rain would fall. If he was angry, it wouldn't just live in his belly, but thunder would roar out and rumble, and lightning would strike out from his hands. The boy didn't have any control over his motions and therefore over the weather. And he noticed he was causing problems for those around him, so he ran away to the forest, and there, and with the help of a traveling band of musicians, he eventually learned to channel his emotions and thus the weather that came with them. So I'm just wondering, does this sound familiar, this storyline, to anyone? Maybe like a motion picture? Perhaps an animated one? From Disney? Anybody? Inside Out. No, Frozen! Frozen! They stole my idea! They did! You see, I sent it out to publishers, children's book publishers. This was in 2005, and I never heard anything back. And I think maybe, just maybe, it got passed around a little bit. And voila, 8 years later, Frozen comes out. I know my child says I'm delulu. That means delusional. And I know Frozen is supposed to be based on the Ice Queen, which was not written by me, but by another Unitarian, Hans Christian Andersen. But still, elemental emotions become the elements, so the watery elements in the sky like rain or snow, ice. Snow and ice, I mean, come on. And Elsa, like the boy, she can't control them at first, and she runs off, not to the forest, but to a wilderness, snowy wilderness in her case. I mean, come on. And this isn't the only time this has happened to me. Many years ago, I also had an idea for a short story about two friends who play tennis once a week for years, for decades, so that they get to know each other so well that they can tell what's going on in the other person's life just by how they're playing tennis. I never wrote the story. I never sent it to any publishers. And I've only told a handful of people about it, randomly, whenever it would come up naturally in conversation. I think I would have titled it Love 40. Because a pivotal moment was supposed to happen when the players are middle-aged, a midlife crisis kind of thing. Whenever I told other people about it, I would usually say that one player knew when the other player was about to get divorced just by how he was playing. And then, just this past year, I was sitting at home watching a movie about two tennis players who grew up playing together, former best friends, and one's marriage is on the rocks, and right there, in the final climactic scene in the middle of a tennis match, one player makes a motion with his tennis ball and tennis racket, a kind of secret friend code that only the other player will understand. Has anyone seen this movie? The one with the actress Zendaya, Challengers it's called? Okay, if they did steal my short story idea, I have to admit they made it better. They made it better than my original idea, and it's probably it's better as a movie than as a short story. Though I'm not sure, I think in the hands of the right writer, it could still make a great short story. So with Frozen, I am actually pretty convinced that they stole my idea. But with this movie version of my tennis short story, well, I never sent that out to be published. I haven't told that many people about it. I mean, it's really unlikely that anyone could have stolen that idea. The writer, Liz Gilbert, of Eat, Pray, Love fame, that was an amazing reading from Liz Gilbert, wasn't it? I know some of you probably discount Liz Gilbert. You think it's chick lit. And I want you to know that she wrote exclusively about men before she wrote that book. I highly recommend The Last Great American Man, which is a book that she wrote before the popular bestseller. Anyways, the writer Liz Gilbert calls this big magic. She says that creative ideas have a life of their own. It's like they're floating around in the ether looking for someone, anyone, to bring them to fruition. And if they come to you and you don't act on them, well, they'll just go find someone else. See, the creative ideas just want to be made. Liz tells about this idea and how it came to, that after she wrote Eat, Pray, Love, she wanted to go back to writing fiction. And her Brazilian sweetheart, remember him from the memoir? The man she met in Bali? Well, he tells her about how in Brazil they tried to make a highway all the way across through the Amazon forest, but it didn't work. This was in the 1960s, because they forgot about the rainy season. Well, this gave her an idea for a novel. So she went right to work. She was researching Brazil and highway construction, outlining the plot of a Minnesotan who travels to Brazil and who goes on a personal odyssey there. But then her Brazilian lover was deported. And so she spent a year abroad with him, working to get it so that he could come back into the United States, and researching the history of marriage, because getting married was the only way to get him citizenship. And both of them had been married and divorced and didn't really want to get married again. She wrote a book about that instead. Maybe you've read it, maybe you haven't. Anyway, when she came back to work on the story about Brazil, it was like the energy had all dried up. The muse had left her. She didn't think that much of it. This kind of thing happens, and she knows that the best thing to do is to just move on and get to work on something else. Except that right around the time that the muse left her, she met the author Anne Patchett. They were both on a panel, and Liz was so blown away by Anne that she had a total fangirl moment. She rushed up and told Anne how amazing she was and how she loved her. And in that moment, Anne did an amazing thing. She kissed Liz Gilbert. And in that moment, a friendship was sparked. Now, they didn't live in the same place, so they wrote each other letters. And in autumn of 2008, Anne shared in a letter that she was working on a new novel set in Brazil. Liz wrote back, "Wow, that's fascinating. I had been working on a novel myself set in Brazil, but it got away from me. What's yours about?" Anne wrote back that it was too early to really say. Fast forward several months later, they get together in person at another literary event, and they're having breakfast, and Anne shares that she's far into the writing process of her novel now. She'd written about 100 pages. Liz says, "You've got to tell me about it." But Anne says, "You go first. Tell me about your Amazon rainforest forest story that got away." So Liz says, it was about this middle-aged spinster from Minnesota who's quietly in love with her married boss for years. He gets involved in a harebrained scheme down in the Amazon jungle. A bunch of money and a person go missing, and my character gets set down there to solve things, at which point her life is turned into chaos. Also, it's a love story. Liz writes that Anne stared at her from across the table for a long minute before saying, "You've got to be fucking kidding me." "Why?" Liz asks. "What's your novel about?" And Anne replies, "It's about a spinster from Minnesota who's been quietly in love with her married boss for years. He gets involved in a harebrained scheme down in the Amazon jungle. A bunch of money and a person go missing, and my character gets set down there to solve things, at which point her life turns into chaos. Also, it's a love story." Liz goes on to explain that the stories weren't exactly the same. The harebrained scheme in Anne's, for example, wasn't about constructing a highway. It was pharmaceutical in nature, but still, it's pretty much the same and pretty niche. Liz writes, "WTF? That is not a genre, people. That storyline is not a Scandinavian murder mystery or a vampire romance. That is a very specific storyline. You cannot go to the bookstore and ask the sales clerk to direct you to the section devoted to books about middle-aged Minnesota spinsters in love with their married bosses who get sent down to the Amazon jungle to find missing people and same doomed projects. That is not a thing." So Anne and Liz, they talk through the timeline and they figure out when the idea changed hands. In fact, they think the idea traveled from one person to the other through that kiss. Now, Liz Gilbert, like me, has other examples, not quite as extraordinary as this one, about ideas that she had that other people ended up bringing to fruition. For example, she thought about writing a story about Newark and its new mayor, Cory Booker. It's kind of a New Jersey theme here this morning, isn't there? She was going to call it Brick City. She was going to follow Cory Booker around and interview him about how he was trying to change the city and about the history. And a few years later, a documentary came out about Newark and Cory Booker, and guess what it was called? Brick City. That's right. You see, it's like me. and frozen. Like me in that tennis movie, Challengers. Like me and my idea to sell unscented perfume. Okay. No one to my knowledge has stolen that idea yet, which may be proof that it really isn't from the creative muses after all. Though I do have the perfect name for it. You. Get it? You. So this is the idea of big magic, that ideas are kind of just floating around in the ether like seeds carried on the wind, just looking for good soil. And they're happy to come into being at the hands of any artist. They don't really care who. They just want to be born. To be born and to grow up and to make their mark in the world. So what? You may be thinking, so what? This is all well and good, Rev Lev, but I'm not an author. So what has this got to do with me? So the subtitle of Liz Gilbert's book, Big Magic, is Creative Living Beyond Fear. And I thought about, all I remembered from the book, which I read many years ago, was a story I just told you about Ann Patchett and Liz Gilbert. So I thought, what's this all about creative living beyond fear? And then I realized that every day the creative muses might be speaking to us. Not about our novels, but about how we spend our days. About how maybe we should be listening to them and following their guidance. Coincidentally, I've been exploring this idea, living like this for a while now. I mean, I have time-constrained responsibilities, like I'm sure you do. For me as a minister, as a parent, even just as a human being with a body, with physical needs, like the need for food and sleep. But I've been trying to listen to the muse of the moment, to let it guide me as to how I spend my time. I think that could work for you too. Your life could be a one-of-a-kind creative act. Your life could be like an unscented perfume that smells like you. So I really want to encourage you to take up this practice of fully being you, fully and completely you. As the Reverend Dr. Howard Thurman put it, don't ask what the world needs. Ask yourself what makes you come alive, and then go do that. Because what the world needs is people who have come alive. So I invite you to do this in big ways and small ways. You know, in my senior year of college, I studied modern dance at the University of Maryland. I decided I didn't want to move to New York City, which was pretty much the only model I'd seen for how to be a professional modern dancer. But I ended up being invited to join a modern dance company in Charlottesville, Virginia. And then I decided I want to start my own collaborative dance company and to do it outside of an urban center. So I moved across country from Virginia to a little hippie community started by the poet and environmentalist Gary Snyder in the foothills of the Sierra Nevada mountain range in California. I had a friend who grew up there that I was going to start the dance company with, but I'd never been there. Side note, more big magic. Accotink member Lisa Sosna grew up in Nevada City, in that very place that I lived years ago. So I could go on, but I'm not suggesting that your creative muse is going to tell you to move to some hippie community with gravel roads and potholes and people who live in converted school buses and make their own moccasins and acorn butter. They really do. Though, I will say, if you haven't done that yet, you might want to put it on your bucket list. I really recommend moving to the Ridge outside of Nevada City, California, and starting a collaborative modern dance company. One of the best experiences in my life. What I'm saying What I'm suggesting is you ask yourself what makes you come alive, and then do that. Don't watch TV or doom scroll if the creative muse is telling you to get out and take a bike ride. Don't take that bike ride if the creative muse is telling you right now what you really need is a nap. Don't let your fear keep you from going to that protest if that's what Spirit is telling you to do. And don't go to that protest if Spirit is telling you that what you really need to be doing is deepening your connection with your neighbors. Speaking of connections, today after church we're having a connection fair. And I have to say that this church needs you, each and every one of you. We need people to just show up to all the many events we offer, the movie nights and the band book clubs and the gardening work days. And we need volunteers to greet the newcomers and serve coffee, to help with the children and youth classes downstairs, to volunteer on committees and all that stuff. But what the world really needs is people who have come alive. So today when you go to that Connections Fair, after the service, ask yourself, what is here that's going to make me come alive? And if you don't find it, if there's something that we don't have yet, let us know so we can make that happen. Choose the thing that's like unscented perfume that smells just like you. Okay, I should have. One time too many with that one. Ask what the Spirit says to do, and whatever the Spirit says, and whenever it says it, do that. And this includes the everyday stuff. Spirit wants us to brush our teeth and wash our hair and put on clean clothes that express some part of who we are. Spirit wants us to care for our children and our partners and our elders and our friends and our neighbors, even people far away from us who we'll probably never meet. You see, I'm not suggesting some kind of self-indulgent life, in case you took that detour. If that's what your creative muse tells you is how you're supposed to live your life, is in a self-indulgent way, disconnected from others and only focused on your own bliss, I don't believe that's really the creative muse speaking. And I don't believe that's what's going to make you come alive. On the other hand, if you think your creative muse is telling you to live a life of drudgery and to sacrifice your individuality or your well-being just so that others can thrive, while you shrivel up and wither away, well, I don't believe that's really the voice of Spirit speaking either. The perfume should smell like you, after all. And you are a multifaceted, sacred being, made up of all the sacred beings you share this world with. I've been recently rewatching a Netflix series called Move. I know they didn't steal the idea from me. Each episode focuses on a different contemporary dance maker. It's from a few years ago. I think there's 6 episodes. It's a great series, but there's one thing that irks me about it. The episodes are about individual dance makers, when each of those dance makers is part of a community and part of a tradition that surrounds and envelops and has created them. A community and a tradition that was in motion before they were ever even born, and that will continue in motion long after they've left this earthly realm. Because the magic, the big magic, it doesn't belong to you or me. Big magic is for everyone. Big magic just wants to come alive. And big magic will come alive in you or me or all of us together if we're open enough. No idea, big or small, belongs to any one person. We human beings are just that interconnected, just that interdependent. We're all influencing each other all the time. No matter who makes anything, in some way, we all made it. Because if that person hadn't read that novel or seen that movie or had that conversation with just that person on just that day, having been raised by just those people in just that community during just that time period, it never would have happened. You've probably had this experience just in everyday conversations. I know I have, where you find yourself saying something really insightful or profound, but you know you've never had that thought before that moment, and never would have had that thought were it not for the other people in that conversation saying all the things that they said earlier in the conversation that led you to having that thought now. Even though in the eyes of those present, you're going to get credit for it. You're going to look like the creative or insightful or loving or wise person, when really we're the ones, all of us together, who are creative and insightful, loving and wise. That's big magic. That's the creative spirit. And it just wants all of us to come alive. It just wants a vessel to be ready to write that symphony or that story or cook that meal or listen to that hurting heart or write that letter to that legislator. That's big magic. That's spirit. And we need to do when the Spirit says do. May it be so. May we be among those who make it so.
Believe in magic in a young girl's soul. Believe in the magic of rock and roll. Believe in the magic, set you free. Oh, dream on, talk about magic. You believe in magic. You believe in magic. Yeah, believe in magic. And you and me.
So please rise now and in body or in spirit. Join in our closing words. As we extinguish our chalice, I invite you to join me now in our community blessing with these words of David Bumbaugh, slightly adapted. This church is dedicated to the proposition that by celebrating our differences and embracing our diversity, we honor the unity and makes us one and binds us forever together in spite of time, death, and the space between the stars. We pause now in silent witness to that unity. Now that we've gathered together in this welcoming and inclusive spiritual home, let us go out into the world inspired to share our values.